Welcome to Andy Staples on 3. Welcome to the retraining of your brain. That's right. As we head toward the 2024 season, we're going to have a few shows like this as we get closer and closer to the various media days and all the stuff that will then start the cavalcade of content that gets you to actual games. But right now, we got to talk about some of the things that are changing, some of the things that are different. And I did a column for On 3 that, that you can read right now. And what I did is I broke down the top 12 in my post-spring rankings and then put them into the playoff bracket. And I was thinking, okay, we all kind of know how this works. We've talked about this ad infinitum. But guess what? When you look at it written down, it's wild. It's crazy. It is going to take getting used to. And so let's work on the retraining the brain. First, we're going to do a little practice. So before the 4-team playoffs started, a bunch of us got invited to Dallas to participate in a mock selection. And they've done this mock selection over the years, and I'm sure they'll do it again with the 12-team. But it was the first time that a bunch of us had figured out how the selection process really works. And actually, at the time, Jeff Long, who was the AD at Arkansas then, was going to be the chair of the actual CFP selection committees. This is 2014 going into that season. And he's sitting next to me because I was the fake chair of our fake selection committee, like taking notes about what's going to happen because they haven't actually done it yet. And was talking to Ben Howmiller, who is the principal game designer behind EA Sports College Football 25. And he was pointing out that if you play Dynasty mode in the video game, you'll actually experience the 12-team playoff before anybody else does. And he's right about that. And I was thinking like that before the committee will have to make the decisions, before anybody actually has to do this. And I was like, all right, let's put these teams into the bracket just to see what this looks like. And then we've got more information now. Like we know what TV stations the games are going to be on. We know what time slots they are. So let's actually look at this. And for that, we bring in On 3's Jesse Simonton. Jesse's helping us retrain our brain too. He's got his all transfer portal team out today. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But Jesse, let's just talk about this playoff bracket. And I mean, we've talked about it for 3 years now because we got our first look at what things would look like 3 years ago. But now it's real. And right, what we have on the screen right now is what the 12 team would look like based on the final rankings last year, which would have been completely different. You would have had a Penn State, Ohio State rematch in round 1 that fed into a game against Washington, probably in the Rose Bowl. But Jesse, when you look at how this works, like, does your brain just say, I don't recognize this?
Well, I don't, when you revealed your top 25, your post-spring post-portal, post-spring top 25, you and I had this conversation in real time. We broke down yours, then we broke down mine, and it was like, whoa, no, remember, because, it's not who's going to be ranked 12th because they may not actually make it, and, who's the group of 5 team going to be? I'm just imagining based on your intro there about, this all, being sprung from EA Sports Dynasty, but you think Ward Manuel is going to be playing this game?
I hope so.
In August, in preparation for September, October, and November meetings, because that would be quite the hoot.
Well, and Ben from EA Sports, who's a Florida State grad, like when Florida State got left out of the playoff last year, he was on the Slack channel with his designers saying, hey, we need to take this. Now, I think there were probably more cuss words in these Slack messages because of what had just happened. But he's basically saying, hey, we need to adjust the decision engine in Dynasty mode to take into account how they view the conferences. And he's not wrong. And that's something that, and we can talk about this with my top 12, like what that actually means and what happens next, because everybody knows that the highest ranked group of 5 team gets in. Everybody knows that there have to be 4 conference champs with buys and 5 conference champs have to get into the playoff. but I'm not sure people are ready for their team getting knocked out by one of those teams. And that's what's going to happen. So let's take a look at the top 12 I had in my post-spring, post-portal ranking. So if you don't like these rankings, I get you. Like I said in the column, I don't live on a private island financed by a bunch of really accurate futures bets. So don't worry, I'm probably going to be wrong if your team's not in here. But for this exercise, this is a good group and will probably give us a lot to chew on. So I had number 1 Ohio State, number 2 Georgia, number 3 Alabama, number 4 Oregon, number 5 Texas, number 6 Michigan, 7 Florida State, 8 Notre Dame, 9 Ole Miss, 10 Kansas State, 11 Tennessee, and 12 Penn State. Jesse, 12 Penn State is where we should start, because if this happens in real life, the anger from Penn State fans at the system and at James Franklin will be absolutely volcanic.
And it's going to be something that, whether they've played dynasty mode or don't have an experience, say Penn State's sitting in that 12 spot for 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to take some time for, I think, the Nittany Lion fans to really marinate on the fact that, oh, we're actually on the outside looking in right now. We're ranked 12. There's a 12-team playoff. It seems like we're about to get in. Oh, no, we actually don't have a spot. And yes, the vitriol would be insane, specifically because so many folks, myself included, have kind of opined that this 12-team playoff was made for a team like Penn State that's been squeezed out, that has been running third in the Big Ten East. Now there's no division, so it seems like they have a better chance. Michigan coming off the national championship, are they going to be down a little bit? Have they done enough in the portal? And this is also the year, Andy, that Penn State specifically, if this happens, if they're the 12th team, if they're right there, but end up being on the outside looking in, not everyone has talked about, us included, by you, me, a lot of folks, Missouri, Ole Miss, some of these schools that are kind of have their chips to the middle of the table, so to speak. I think Penn State's in the same situation. This is their ballyhoo junior class with Singleton and Allen, Drew Aller, Abdul Carter, all these guys who were 4- and 5-star recruits are now juniors, on the cusp of going to the NFL. If they don't get it done this year, good luck to James.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and he's not going anywhere. But it would deepen the ennui if
Right.
that makes sense. Like, and because the Penn State fandom, I don't think anybody, like, they're not mad anymore. They're just kind of bored right now, and I think they need to make the playoff to snap out of the boredom. And this can't happen. So here's the thing, Jesse. In this situation, I do have an ACC champ and a Big 12 champ that are ranked within the top 12. So that's good. There are going to be years where there's not. So a few years ago when Pittsburgh won the ACC, they were number 12 in the final CFP ranking. So they would be in, that would be fine. But what happens if, let's say, the ACC champ or the Big 12 champ is ranked 15th? Well, guess what? That team's getting in, as well as the top ranked group of 5 champ.
And don't you think that there's a pretty plausible, outcome this season if the Big 12 is kind of the meat grinder that we think it's going to be, where it's such a grab bag of, because I did the win totals. I think there's like 7 teams that have win totals of 7.5, just 7.5. And then you got Utah, Kansas State, and Kansas that are all in that, 8 to 9 range, 9.5 range. So it's absolutely plausible that a 9-3 Kansas State team is going up against a 9-3 Oklahoma State team, and whoever wins that game is the Big 12 champ, and maybe they're ranked 13th or 17th or something like that in the final polls, and suddenly Tennessee's getting squeezed out.
Yeah, and well, at least the Tennessee fan base is known for its reasonable, rational reactions to different things.
Absolutely.
I don't think there. Oh wait, no, that would be. Can you even imagine? Like, that would be 10 times what Florida State was last year in terms of negative reaction, because it's the Tennessee fan base.
Yeah. VolQuest would be the flames emanating out of Volquest would just be, that's your ennui right there.
That's not ennui. Ennui is boredom. That's just pure, just lava coming from the Tennessee, and that's what it would be. So if Tennessee's 11 and they're booted out because the number 15 Big 12 champ has to get in, that's exactly what it's going to be like. All right, okay. So let's talk about who would you. We'll go with the teams we got though. So we'll say Florida State's. I've got Florida State at 7. I got Kansas State at 10. So they're in. ACC, Big 12 are in. But remember, 7 and 10 are not what they seem. We'll get to that in a second, but we got to put somebody at number 12, not the 12th ranking, but the 12th seed. So the 12th seed in this case has to be the top ranked Group of 5 champ. I don't know how to handicap that this year. That's very hard. You got SMU, the outgoing American or the reigning American champ. They're leaving for the ACC. Tulane's under new management. Memphis is kind of the establishment now in the AAC. The Sun Belt's probably the deepest league, but it's got that Big 12 situation where they all might just beat each other up. So I went with a classic choice, Jesse. Boise State would have been in this spot multiple times had this been in effect, going back years. They won the Mountain West last year, despite firing Andy Avalos midseason. Spencer Danielson comes in, wins the Mountain West. He takes over as the permanent coach. So we put the Broncos in here. So congratulations. That doesn't mean you're playing on the blue, though.
Means you got to face that 5 seed.
That's right.
But you know what's funny is that you picked, whether it was out of a hat or you just kind of you went with past history. Boise State being the G5 representation here. I did a breakdown last week of ESPN released their latest FPI, and there's plenty of controversy and all that, and I went through some of that, but there can still be some notable takeaways and kind of some interesting insights into their rankings and analytics, and they have, based on their metrics, Boise State as the most likely G5 champ to make the playoff, which I thought was interesting. Liberty has easily the most cupcake schedule, and if they beat App State in late September, it's hard not seeing Jamie Chadwell's team going 12-0. But do they get penalized this year because they got just completely waxed last season versus Oregon? And does the committee say, we don't want that as our first 12 seed if Boise State's also undefeated or a one-loss? So we'll see. But I think, that's going to be an interesting, however that plays out. I think UTSA is maybe another one to watch there.
Yeah. And the thing is, so Boise State got Ashton Genty back, one of the best retention jobs in the Group of 5, but also
Malachi Nelson.
Yeah. They get Malachi Nelson coming from USC. Liberty, remember, undefeated last year, was ranked number 23, undefeated in the final because their schedule was so easy. Christopher in the chat, going with Liberty, Tulane, or Boise State. Those are good choices. I could see John Summerall in year 1 at Tulane being good enough to win the American. So we'll find out what happens there. But that's the team we're putting in. And so before we talk about these matchups, if you'd like to see these matchups, any of these matchups, Game Time has tickets. So download that Game Time app. You can use the code STAPLES. Your first purchase, $20 off. Terms apply, of course. But redeem the code STAPLES, get $20 off your first person. Now, maybe you want to do that on a concert. Maybe you want to go to like a Chris Stapleton show this summer before you dive in to the college football playoff. But yeah, if you want to see any of these college football playoff games, now we're talking about hypothetical ones, but if you want to go to the real ones, Game Time will have tickets to all of them. Plus, they will have tickets to all of the big college football games next year. So if you want to follow your team on the road, if you've done the we're picking a weekend, we're going to a Big Ten road game, a Big Ten game, or a big SEC game, a place we've never been, Game Time is the place to go for those tickets. So download that Game Time app, use the code STAPLES, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Game Time has tickets to everything you could need, comedy shows, concerts, games, you name it. And you can get them at the last minute for the best price guaranteed. All right. Now we've worked that in there, which is true. you can get tickets to all of these games on Game Time, and there's a couple of these that you're going to have to go to Game Time if you want tickets, because they're going to be such big games. But here's what that would look like if we took my top 12. We made Boise State the Mountain West champ and the highest ranked Group of 5 champ. Here's what the first round of games would look like. Number 12 Boise State at number 5 Alabama. That's your noon game on December 21st, noon Eastern time on December 21st, because it's the worst of the 4 games. That's where they're going to dump it. It's going to be on TNT. It's going to be up against the Chiefs-Texans game on NBC, because the NFL is trying to scare the college football playoff off this day, Jesse.
And we still don't know who the TNT announcers are, right?
No, it's ESPN. Like, ESPN is producing the game.
ESPN,
so it's going to look like ESPN, but it will be on TNT.
Okay. So they're just sub-licensing. Because I was going to say this, if TNT loses the NBA rights, just, Charles needs to do some work. Make him go cover an Alabama game.
I said that. Like, have them be the pregame show. Now, we all know Charles is not going to be there if they don't have the NBA. So, but Charles may get hired by ESPN anyway. So, knowing how ESPN works, where they'll put Stephen A in front of anything. Like, if you hire Charles Barkley, you're going to use him in every potential situation. So, of course, you're going to send him. Like, and of course, you need to send Auburn grad Charles to Tuscaloosa for this game. That would be incredible.
I mean, that's you got to use your resources, right? You use your talents.
Yep.
Now, that would be a great game, though.
This would be, and we'll talk about number 5 right now, because number 5 is the catbird seat. So in this situation, we're not sure how everything actually works during the season. We're trying to predict that final ranking. The question is, did Alabama lose the SEC championship game, or did Alabama miss the SEC championship game? And like Ole Miss or Texas lost the SEC championship game and fell behind Alabama. If Alabama didn't play in the SEC championship game and wound up at 5, or if you had like Oregon not playing in the Big Ten championship game and winding up at 5, like 5 is the ultimate spot, especially if you did not have to go lose your conference championship game. 5 is the best spot, because here's why. It has to do with the mechanics of the bracket. They're not reseeding like the NFL. It doesn't reseed at the end of a round to make sure that you go and play the toughest team available. So 5-12, the winner of that game is going to play the 4 seed. The thing is, the 4 seed is not really number 4. Like in our ranking, we had Big 12 champ Kansas State at 10. Well, that's the 4th highest seeded conference champ, or 4th highest ranked conference champ. So they're the 4 seed. So the winner of this 5-12 game plays the 4 seed. There's two things here. You could have a number 5 team that is probably the 2nd or 3rd best team in the country that just dump trucks the 12 seed and then dump trucks the 4 seed and walks into the semis with an easier path than the 1 seed had. Or if the 12 does upset the 5, which is much harder, because the 5's not really ever going to be the 5. The 12 could beat the 4. And then you got a Cinderella.
Yeah, I mean, the machinations of all this are pretty fun, which is why we're doing this exact exercise. What does stink is that, for that 4 seed, and why I think a lot of folks have, started to discuss the benefits of being the 5 seed, is that that 4 seed didn't get, they're not getting to host a home game. That game's being played in the Fiesta Bowl. That's it. It's not in Kansas State. You're not playing in Manhattan, and so that stinks for them. But that's why I don't think, and this is going to be something we'll probably discuss throughout the fall, Andy. I don't think you're going to see teams, kind of take the foot off the gas like what happens in the NFL late in the year, where they start resting players and they don't care if they lose that 16th or 7th, week 16 or week 17. I don't think you're going to see that, at least in the first couple of years of the playoff, in terms of teams kind of jockeying for certain seeds because, we really want that 5 seed so that we don't play in the SEC championship game. Because I do think teams are still going to value the buys. The buys are so, as valuable as the 5th seed is, those 4 buys are still the ultimate carrot, because even if this game for Alabama, most Alabama fans would say, "Oh, that's a layup. We get Boise State at home in Tuscaloosa. We're going to win that game." Well, yeah, you probably will, but that doesn't mean your team isn't, still
Or you might,
an inherent
get
risk.
somebody hurt. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, a year ago, Florida State, yeah, of course they were always going to beat, whoever it was that out North Alabama or whoever that Jordan Travis got hurt against. But they had to play that game. Jordan Travis gets hurt. Their season, completely changes. And so the 5th seed, while valuable, isn't more valuable than 1 through 4. But it does present an interesting scenario if the 12 is able to upset, or if the 5th seed is really maybe the 3rd or 4th best team in the country, then they get to play. Let's say Kansas State is 17 or 14 or whatever. There's a pretty big gap there.
So my next first round game, Tennessee at Oregon. That's going to be your Friday night game in Eugene on ESPN and ABC. That's the other thing.
Get your fireworks.
They're going to simulcast like they do Monday Night Football. So these games are going to be on ABC. That's probably where most of the people are going to be watching it. It will look like an ESPN broadcast and everything. Same thing. But this would be in Eugene, and this is a case of where 1 win, 1 loss probably makes a big difference. Like the difference between Tennessee having to go on the road here and Oregon hosting is probably going to be 1 game in the record.
I mean, that's the 2 Hawaiians dueling Hawaiians right there. You got Dylan.
Well, Nico's from California. He's from Long Beach, baby.
Oh, okay. I thought he had a little Hawaiian in him. Maybe not. Okay, but that'd be one heck of a game right there. Tennessee Oregon would be a juicy matchup. I mean, you're talking about all the track speed that Oregon has recruited at wide receiver. You bring in Evan Stewart. They bring back Tez Johnson. What Dan Lanning's done with that program has been, really impressive just from a talent acquisition perspective. And then Josh Heupel. I mean, Tennessee has just kind of slowly put this thing back together. I think there's a lot of folks in Knoxville that believe this 2024 team, is even more talented 1 through 85 than the 22 team that beat Alabama and was kind of a fringe playoff team that year. So if Banks' defense can continue to kind of come together, this would be a heck of a game.
Oh, it'd be tremendous. Now, here's another one. Number 10 Ole Miss at number 7 Texas. This is not a rematch because remember, they don't play in the regular season in the SEC. Now, potentially you could see these two in the SEC championship game together against each other. But if that were the case, they're not playing in a 10-7 game in the playoff because one of them is going to be the 1 or the 2 seed. But this would be fantastic too. This would be your afternoon game on Saturday on TNT. TNT lucking out with this one because the only reason is that 8-9 game is one that ESPN's definitely taking. So, but that would be a tremendous matchup because this is new. It's actually SEC new money versus SEC new money.
It is, and this is the Ole Miss. I mean, they're going all in. But this would be a game that, Rebel fans have been waiting 60 years for because they have just not been on a national scale competitive to where they can say, hey, we're in the mix for an SEC championship game, or, oh, we actually have a legitimate shot at winning the national championship. Lane's done wonders for that program, 11-win season, school record a year ago. But if he gets them to the playoff, they may build him a statue. Over there. So
what does the Lane Kiffin statue look like, by the way? He's throwing up the play sheet, right?
Throwing up the play sheet. Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. With his back kind of turned a little bit, away from the field.
His hoodie flying up in the air.
Or it's him with his hands, with the play sheet in his hands, already throwing up like the we got it touchdown, the touchdown celebration when the ball's still, whizzing through the air.
Probably easier to do in bronze if he's holding it still in his hand.
Yeah.
As we go to the 9-8 game, the 8-9 game, I want to point out something in the chat, and Ozzy and Willie have been talking this out in the chat, and they've got it straightened out. But we'll go back to Ozzy's first comment. The 5th seed could be the 2nd best team in the country, but would have to play the number 1 team in the quarterfinals. No. The 5th seed plays the number 4 team in the quarterfinals if they win. The 1 seed plays the winner of the 8-9 game. And Ozzy's got this figured out in the chat. But for everybody else, let's explain. So your 8-9 game in this situation is the one that ESPN will want. It will be the one that will cost you the most if you're trying to buy tickets on Game Time. Number 9, Notre Dame at number 8, Michigan. The first Notre Dame-Michigan game at the Big House is 2019. It would be for a lot of stakes, and the winner would play Ohio State in the Rose Bowl, because I've got Ohio State as the number 1 seed. Can you even imagine, Jesse? Can you even imagine? What if Michigan beat Ohio State in the regular season, or maybe Michigan lost in controversial fashion to Ohio State in the regular season, and now they've got to beat Notre Dame to get a rematch in the Rose Bowl?
The amount of conspiracy theories that'll be spawned if this matchup happens, because so many folks will think the committee, did it on purpose because it's 2 of the biggest brands in the sport. ESPN, they're, the machinations with that. Because, you talk about a helmet game, Michigan, Notre Dame, for the chance to play the 1 seed in the inaugural college, 12-team playoff would be nuts. And I'm high on Notre Dame this year. I think this is year 3's famous. That's famous for Notre Dame coaches, Andy. It's a sink or swim season. I wrote a column on it about Marcus Freeman about a week ago. Go check that out at On 3. The history is rich, from Lou Holtz to a couple other guys there. Even Brian Kelly played for a national championship in his 3rd season. And then you got the likes of Charlie Weiss and Ty Willingham, and those guys. They basically face planted in year 3. So Marcus Freeman, he brings back a hell of a team this year. Notre Dame, in my On 3 unit rankings, the Notre Dame beat writers actually pointed this out. I didn't even recognize this. They were the only team other than Georgia that was represented in every single category, that had a top 10 unit in every single category. So that's the sort of roster that Marcus Freeman's dealing with right now. This would be one heck of a game if that's the way it played out.
Well, that's the thing. And Notre Dame's another one of these. Now, we've seen Notre Dame in the playoff a few times, and they've lost, in the semis.
Badly.
Notre Dame is the type of program I feel like that can win some games, especially getting into this situation. And Jack Swarbrick, the former Notre Dame athletic director, was part of the group that created this playoff format. You saw with the 5 seed what he was going at. Like, why? I thought it was hilarious when earlier this year they came out with, okay, this is how it's going to be. We already knew that because we've been covering it for 3 years. It was interesting to me how many folks who don't follow this day to day were like, doesn't Notre Dame know they can never have a bye? Like, Jack Swarbrick knew that all along. He understands they don't have to play in a conference championship game, so they don't have to worry about that extra game. It basically puts them in the same boat as a team in a power conference that had to play in its championship game. But if they can get the 5 or the 6 seed, they're in good shape.
And I think in most years, because this year Notre Dame actually plays, all things considered, a probably easier schedule than they typically do.
Yeah.
They typically don't have an FCS team. They typically aren't playing Army and Navy in the same year. So let's say this year notwithstanding, but I think against most schedules, if a Notre Dame goes 9-3 in most years, they're probably in. This year they probably got to go at least 10-2, because again, there's some extra patsies on there they don't typically play. But you still have USC, Florida State, the opener against Texas A&M. Game day is going to be there. That's Elko going up against his former compadres there. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be quite interesting to just see how Notre Dame's season kind of materializes, because there is kind of all these expectations with the fact that, yeah, they can't get a bye, but they have a pretty strong, chance of making the dance.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how this all works. Go Vols, not 393. Tennessee will be in. They make it 40% of the time, according to FPI. Mizzou only 30%. Yes, a 10% difference in FPI in June will guarantee everything. But I love that everybody's arguing about this now.
Well, did you see? I don't know if you saw. I don't know if you saw my column on this. I do think what's interesting, just because that Tennessee fan brought this up last year in the 14 playoff in ESPN's FPI rankings, 8 teams had at least a 20% chance of making the field. Now that field has ballooned to 12, the 20% threshold is now 18 teams. So it does kind of, put in real numbers, real perspective, just how many more opportunities there are for the Missouris and for the Tennessees to even be in the mix this year compared to the last, several seasons.
Well, and I think because of the competitiveness of the Big 12, especially, I think the real number of teams that can start this season with a, somewhat realistic playoff hope is closer to 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've got a group of 5 teams, like all of that.
Right.
All of that matters.
Right. Yep.
Jesse, let's talk about your all portal team, because you did come out with that today at On3. You can check out Jesse's column. You can read my playoff column, or a lot of the stuff we've been talking about here kind of in the abstract, you can see written down, which I think helps. But Jesse's all portal team. Jesse, I'm looking at your names on this thing, and the thing that jumps out to me that I think we didn't
Miami
see,
fans are going to be pissed.
That, but also linemen hit the portal this year. Good quality linemen hit the portal, where we said, well, that's going to be harder.
Yeah, no, I mean, one of them is particularly unique, in that Caden Proctor is probably, our ultimate boomerang transfer, because the guy, somehow Iowa got penalized, got a couple of violations, even though the kid never even suited up for a single spring practice for him. You talk about the ultimate tease there. He was committed to you for all that time, flips to Alabama on signing day, plays for the Tide, then ends up transferring to Iowa, and still never even puts on a Hawkeyes uniform, even for a single practice. He is, my starting left tackle, but he's not the only one. I mean, with all the movement, with Washington, several of their offensive linemen were certainly eligible for this team. I think Brailsford is probably the best center. He's one of the best centers in the country, not even just a transfer. So he certainly, I think, is going to be a shoe-in, plug-and-play replacement for Seth McLaughlin there. Hurd, now at Tennessee.
Yeah, Lance Hurd.
He was a guy that was a former, 5-star blue chip guy. He's a quality player. He just simply got squeezed out because LSU has 2 first-round or 2 NFL draft picks at tackle right now, and he wanted to see the field immediately. He'll now get to play, and protect Nico for at least 2 seasons. So that's a big deal. Caden Green, another blue chip guy. That was kind of a unique situation. Oklahoma was pretty stunned, I think, when he transferred. That was not someone that Brent Venables wanted to lose.
And Mizzou needed somebody like him.
They needed somebody like him, and he goes home, and that's kind of Mizzou's they were able to benefit from, their nice NIL laws, state. And so he takes advantage there. So lots of offensive linemen. Ole Miss has several guys who I think could have qualified, didn't quite make the cut. But that's a quality, starting 5 right there.
Well, and you do have Ole Miss represented twice on the defense.
Yes.
On the defensive line with Walter Nolan and Princely Emmanuel. They get them both from other SEC schools. And this was, again, we keep talking about Ole Miss. What was the difference? When Ole Miss lost to Alabama last year, when Ole Miss got dismantled by Georgia last year, it was on the line of scrimmage. This is how they handle that.
Yeah, and with Ole Miss, it's not an either-or situation. I think what Lane deserves credit for, he has recruited kind of a mercenary defense, but they also bring back some of their better players off last year's squad. And so, like, J.J. Pagui is still there. Oh, that's a quality SEC defensive lineman. Cedric Johnson's still there. Another quality, guy who's played.
J.J. Pagui's also a quality Wildcat quarterback. It's in the playbook. He did it when he was at Auburn. It's possible.
Yeah. And we've seen him play tight end too. He's done a little bit of everything. But you supplement those guys with a 5-star in Walter Nolan, who had 7 sacks last year, for Texas A&M. You bring in Princely, who was one of the most, productive pass rushers in the SEC a year ago. High win rate per PFF. He's kind of a twitchy guy off the edge, bendy. With Ole Miss, it's going to be just putting everything together. How do does the puzzle fit? I think that's probably Lane's biggest concern. From a chemistry and bringing everything together, because individually you're like, man, that's a really nice looking piece right there. Oh, that's a really nice looking square, edge right there. Does it come together? That's what we're going to find out.
Well, and interesting. So you have Dillon Gabriel going from Oklahoma to Oregon as your quarterback. This probably wasn't the easiest choice. Why him over Cam Ward, who goes from Washington State to Miami? Will Howard going from Kansas State to Ohio State? Why Dillon Gabriel at that spot?
For me, I just think Cam Ward is certainly an extremely productive quarterback, and the excitement there out of Coral Gables. I mean, and the optimism. Everything you've heard from a leadership, from a playmaking perspective, I think Cam Ward, the ceiling's pretty high there, and that's why a lot of folks think the Canes could win possibly the ACC this year. But Gabriel's he's stuffed the stat sheet no matter where he's been, whether it was at UCF, whether it was at Oklahoma a year ago. He leads the Pac-12 or leads the Big 12 in passing, completion percentage, touchdowns. I think he's going to be, dynamite in Will Stein's, RPO offense, throwing to Evan Stewart, who is also one of my wide receivers on this team, Tez Johnson. So I just, the upside there, is probably 50-50. But if I'm going to base it a little bit on past performance and projecting how these guys are going to fit into individual schemes, I've seen Will Stein, work wonders, with a guy who can kind of do the RPO thing a year ago with Bo Nix. I think another lefty right there with my little Hawaiian southpaw is going to be my QB1.
Well, yeah, and we know Will Stein works well with lefties because he worked with Frank Harris at UTSA. Yeah. So he does like the lefties. But well, Jesse, it has been a pleasure. We're going to talk a little more about transfer quarterbacks with Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl up next. But Jesse, thank you so much for helping us digest the playoff. The more we talk about it, one, the more excited I get for the on-campus games. But two, the more I realize this is going to be a learning curve for all of us.
Yeah, and those are going to be some fun-filled December Saturdays for sure.
Oh, cannot wait. Jesse Simonton from On3, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, so I mentioned we're going to talk transfer quarterbacks. Cam Ward, Will Howard, Dillon Gabriel. These guys going into positions where, like, Will Howard is playing on the team that is expected to win the Big Ten and probably is going to be most people's odds-on favorite to win the national title. Dillon Gabriel playing for the other team that's expected to be in the Big Ten title game. Cam Ward playing for a Miami team with massive expectations. What's interesting about these guys is, especially with Cam Ward and Will Howard, but also a little bit Dillon Gabriel, they had to make a choice of, do they go to another school this year or do they go to the NFL? And that's where our friend Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Senior Bowl, comes in, because he had to study these guys to decide, okay, would they get an invite this past offseason if they decided to come out? And so he's got a lot of good intel on these guys, and you can kind of figure out how excited you should be about each of them as they move to their new schools. So here is Jim Nagy. We are honored to be joined now by our friend Jim Nagy, the executive director of the Reese's Senior Bowl. And Jim, this has been fun. I was looking at your Twitter feed the other day, and you're starting to tweet out these profiles of guys who came out of the transfer portal who will be playing for other schools. And I realized, wait, they've done so much scouting on a lot of these guys who are going to be in college football next year, because you guys didn't know if some of these guys were going to be in college or going on to the NFL after last season.
Yeah, Andy, it's been kind of crazy with some of these guys. Like, you probably saw the post with Cam Ward.
Yeah,
right? We started watching Cam Ward when he was at Incarnate Word, 3 years ago or whatever. Now he's at his third school, but it's happened a lot. We really had day three, a good chunk of day three grades wiped off our board this year of guys that went back to school. So when we were scrambling in January, had a couple guys get injured, that were going to be in last year's game. We were trying to replace them. you're circling back to like fill in roster holes, and you look up and you've got a running back from Mississippi State is now at USC. Well, we can't go get him. You've got all these guys in moving parts, and the good news is we've done a bunch of work. We don't have to do a ton of work on those guys in the spring, but so it's obviously a whole new landscape.
Well, we'll have to ask about Woody Marks a little bit later, but you mentioned Cam Ward, and that's a guy who I feel like that's who everybody asked me about, because the expectations for Miami this year are pretty high. They obviously did a lot of work in the transfer portal beyond Cam Ward, but he's kind of the linchpin of their transfer class. Plus, he's behind some pretty highly recruited offensive linemen. What did you think of Cam Ward coming out of Washington State, and how do you think he fits at Miami?
Yeah, it was it was a little bit of a tough eval, to be honest, with just with the apples to oranges nature of the offense, and not asking him to do a lot of things he's going to have to do at the NFL level. So I think it made sense. I hate it for Washington State. We've had Gardner Minshew and a couple other good quarterbacks come out of that school, but for Cam, it did make for a tough eval. The thing that you did see and you immediately like is his ability to extend plays. I mean, he's got a little magic to him. I mean, he's a fun guy to watch run around. And then, connected with Shannon Dawson, the OC down at Miami. I hit up he and Mario Cristobal the other day and just asked how that transition's going with him. First of all, they love coaching the guy, but his ability to see windows on the move and throw accurately on the move. That's the most important thing, right? Guys that can move around and extend plays. A lot of times those guys are looking to run. I mean, this guy can see things downfield and put the ball where he needs to put it. So I'm excited to see him. They've got a big time running back transferring from Oregon State as well. So that should be a fun offense.
Well, and another guy that was kind of trying to decide going to the NFL, stay in college, transfer, was Will Howard, who winds up at Ohio State. There may not be a more talented roster in college football than Ohio State. I feel like, I'm looking at what we were talking about Michigan this time last year in terms of guys who very easily could be in the NFL who came back. How does Will Howard fit, and what did you see from him when you studied him at Kansas State?
Yeah, I like Will a lot. I was on campus there in Manhattan last November, giving an invite out to his best buddy, Ben Sennett, who ended up going in the early second round to the Commanders. And so I got a chance to talk to Will that day. It was really a weird dynamic how it worked out for Will. Unfortunately, we ended up with Michael Penix in the Senior Bowl and Bo Nix in the Senior Bowl. But, we were waiting on Jaden Daniels at that time to see what Jaden was going to do. And it was kind of dragging along. We didn't get an answer from Jaden's camp for a long time. So when I did circle back to Will Howard to invite him, this literally happened. I called Will one morning in late December, and I said, Will, we've got a spot, man. And he really wanted to play in the game. He's like, Jim, I'm literally on a plane to Columbus, Ohio today.
Wow.
So at that point, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to call Ryan Day and try to make an issue out of this thing. But no, we do. We like Will a lot. We watched him for a couple of years. I think he's got a good arm. I like the accuracy. He does a lot of NFL transferable things from that Kansas State tape, watching him operate from under center and the play action game. So, and we've seen a lot of quarterbacks put up big numbers for the Buckeyes. And I think Will's going to do that. And like you said, if you just look at transfer portal in this offseason, I think there's really 4 teams that stick out that really went out and spent money and are going for this thing. And to me, it's Ohio State, Ole Miss, Miami, and Louisville. I'm sure there's plenty of other programs that spent money and went out and are trying to upgrade. But to me, those 4 stand out.
It's funny you said that, because we just had a game show on the show called Whose Team Is It Anyway, where a couple of us basically our transfer portal expert throws out a name, and a couple of us have to name what their new school is, what their old school was. And our kind of rule of thumb was, if you don't know who it is, just guess Miami or Louisville, and you'll probably be right. So it's true though. That is basically what happened. Will's an interesting one because he's going to that Chip Kelly offense, and I'm trying to imagine Will doing a lot of things that Dorian Thompson-Robinson did, because Will's a bigger version of but athletic like DTR was, and has a pretty good arm, and so I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, obviously, I mentioned the Ohio State offense. It's going to be different with Chip there. but yeah, and that's the other part I didn't say about Will Howard. He's athletic, man. The guy can, I mean, now the young guy they had behind him there at Kansas State is super athletic, and he's a smaller guy. But for his size, Will's a really good athlete with good mobility. So as a Michigan alum, like it's going to be a different year. It's going to be a different year watching those Buckeyes. But I think they're going to be really good. I think Ohio State's going to be a really good football team.
Well, so another one of those schools you mentioned where, they definitely did a lot in the transfer portal is Ole Miss. And, one of the things we've talked about on the show over and over again is they seem to have actually improved themselves in the trenches through the portal, which a lot of the higher end teams can't do because those guys aren't typically available. But Princely Umanmiellen's one of the guys that they got, and he was Florida's best edge rusher last year. And now he goes to Ole Miss. He'll work alongside Walter Nolan there. What did you see out of Princely in Gainesville?
Yeah, I mean, I love the body type for an edge player. I mean, he's got length, and he knows how to use it. He's a guy that he can set the edge because he's a big, stout guy. He can run from the backside, and he's got pass rush. So he's really an all-around edge player. I mean, some guys can play on first and second. Some guys are just sub-down rushers. I think he's got a pretty good skill set there. I mean, he's another guy. I mean, when you bring up Princely's name, I just go back to last December, and I think he was thinking about going in the transfer portal, and Billy Napier asked if I would get on the phone with him. And we spoke for like an hour, man. Like this, and what that phone conversation showed me is just the decisions that some of these guys are having to make right now and how difficult it is on some of these players. Sure, there's people out there, fans out there saying, wow, I'd love to make those kind of decisions, go to the NFL or transfer to Florida, transfer to Ole Miss or make this kind of money. But it really was hard on them. I mean, Florida's cranked out a lot of good edge players, a lot of guys at that position over the years. But it's that opened my eyes. I haven't talked to a lot of players directly. That was one of the first guys that really a coach included me in the conversation on. But yeah, it's a really good ad for Ole Miss. I mean, this guy's going to add pressure up front.
It's such an interesting new wrinkle to it too, because before it was, do you stay at this school or do you go pro? And, if you go pro too early, you might cost yourself some money in terms of the guarantee in the first contract if you could have moved up a couple rounds. But if you go pro, if you don't go pro when you can and something happens, then you're out some money. But now you add that extra layer of there's potentially some good NIL money in going to another school, and then you also may be able to help your draft stock.
There's so many variables now. There really are, and again, I feel like this generation of player is a little bit in the guinea pig phase because for years, I mean, these guys used to draw on the experiences of their teammates, right? They could call the guys they were in the locker room with a couple years before, like, hey, how did you handle this? Like, do you feel good about the path that you went down? Do you have any regrets? Like right now, these guys are kind of uncharted waters. They have no one really to bounce this stuff off. So it is certainly an interesting time with the decisions these guys are having to make. And you think about like what an extra year does for some of these players. I'll just bring it back to one guy in this year's draft class, and that's Darius Robinson from Missouri. Andy, when you and I were at SEC Media Days last July, about a year ago. We
talked about him. You said he asked you, how do I get in your game next year?
Yeah, he's like, why didn't you invite me last year? And quite frankly, I'm honest with all these guys. I said, Darius, we had you in like the 4th or 5th round. Like that was right around where the cut line was. There wasn't a huge push from the 32 teams, to bring you to the game. And here's what I'd probably be looking for from my perspective. And he goes out and he's a 1st round draft pick, crushes Senior Bowl week. He's our practice player of the week, and he goes in the 1st round of the Arizona Cardinals. So, him going back, he made millions and millions of dollars going from being a 4th or 5th round draft pick to a 1st round pick. So it's just a lot, man. Like you said, or he could have gone back to school and gotten hurt. You never know. So it's really hard on all these guys. I know a lot of fans don't sympathize with the players, and they're upset when their players leave the school and transfer to another school. But I always tell people, like, look at it through the lens. If they were your brother or your nephew or your cousin, like, and they've got opportunities to help themselves financially, and it's hard. It's hard, and these guys are trying to really go through this thing without a lot of help.
And it's amazing what's happened with the quarterbacks, especially because like Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., if they had left college after 4 years of college, they would have never sniffed anything close to the first round. I mean, one of them may not even have been drafted, and Penix might not have even been drafted had he left college after 4 years. So it's such a strange situation. And I like Dylan Gabriel, who has done some interviews lately where he said basically the word he got back, the feedback he got back was 6th round, 7th round, maybe undrafted. And that's why he went to Oregon instead of trying to go pro, or, Oklahoma obviously has Jackson Arnold now, but that was the process is so strange because like, could Dylan Gabriel play himself into a much better spot like Bo Nix did?
It'll be interesting to see. I think where people have to understand is there's the difference between being and I'm not saying this, that it's Dylan Gabriel. The point
right.
I'm trying to make, like, there is a difference between being a really good college quarterback, which obviously Dylan is, and being a great pro prospect. So, a lot of times fans scratch their head, like, why would Dylan Gabriel go back to school? I think what he said is where the league had him, because we have those conversations with teams. That's part of our process, is we have those, we try to gauge where the league is at. And so, for Dylan, he's going into an offense, very smart of him. He's going to a school where a guy just came from being a first-round draft pick. So we'll see. Dylan, obviously a little undersized guy, and, he made comments when he didn't get a Senior Bowl invite that was part of his decision-making process. So I'm excited to see him, man. I really like, we talked about on the show last year, I think the Tua comparison is real. Those guys both being, from Hawaii and everything, that stuff aside, you watch him throw, you watch him play. I mean, there's some similarities there. So, I thought he would get drafted. I did think if he came out, he would have been drafted. And there weren't a whole lot of guys that even got picked this year at the quarterback position. You think we went from those 6 in the top 12, and then we waited all the way till, basically the 5th round for Spencer Rattler and some of these guys to start coming off. But no, it'll be interesting to see Dylan and Eugene. We're excited to see him.
Well, another guy, and we were talking about Ohio State earlier, Quinshon Judkins from Ole Miss, who had a really good career at Ole Miss, decides to go to Ohio State, decided to get into the portal. And this is a situation where you guys weren't looking at guys like this before who could be a 3-and-done kind of guy. But how much has that changed in terms of how much you've got to scout?
Yeah, now we are. Now he's a true junior, and he's on our radar. We can bring him to Mobile. So, it's changed it. Again, we're not looking at every junior, Andy. We're trying to be efficient here. We've got enough seniors to evaluate on tape right now. I'm overwhelmed with all the seniors I need to watch this summer. But we do need to look at the high-profile juniors. If you just use this year's class as a frame of reference, we talked about, I want to say 58, 59 juniors came out. So right now on the board, I think we have somewhere between 75 and 100. So it's certainly created more work. For our game, some of these guys are easy, right? Like, you watch some of these early out junior guys, and they're no-brainers for an all-star game. So I don't have to spend a whole ton of time, watching some of these guys. But we watched
Kenneth Grant and Mason Graham at Michigan. Not really much to watch there, right? They're pretty darn good.
Those guys were pretty easy. Those guys are good players, and it's like when Aiden Hutchinson came out. Like, I don't even know if I put on Aiden Hutchinson tape, the fall of his senior year, because, I knew what I felt about him from the previous year. So we're just trying to get our guys drafted. Andy, we don't need to zero in on where we would draft them, but we watch Judkins. We watched Judkins. We had our scout school this week that we do for former NFL players, and we put Judkins was one of the players we watched as a group, and we had 2 good running backs in the room. Clinton Portis and Chris Johnson were part of this year's scout school. So it was cool. Yeah, it was cool to hear their feedback on Judkins. Like, what I like about him, he played against my son's high school team. So I've seen this guy play when he was a high school player, which is kind of fun. But I just love the power he runs with. He's got nice feet to get downhill. He can condense his pads and drop his pads on you. He runs physical. And he's got the feet. He's got some, nice shiftiness between the tackles where he can get in a crease. So he's a good player. Like, he and Travion Henderson, man, that is a heck of a 1-2 punch. When they get into like November and the weather starts getting cold up there, And I think they're going to be playing into the playoffs, so they might have a home playoff game. That is going to be they're going to be hard. They're going to be running downhill at you with those two dudes.
Yeah, I just don't know how you tackle. Like you may be able to bring one down, but then he gets a little gas after he gains 20 yards on you, and they bring the next one. But another program that's just loaded like that, and I'm fascinated by this guy. We've talked about him a little bit on the show already, but I wanted to talk to you about it because you've studied him a lot more. Is Ben Urosic, the tight end from Stanford, who's going to Georgia, because between injuries and then Stanford, being, changing coaches, changing everything, I don't know that we've gotten to see exactly what this guy can be, but it seems like from a skill set, perspective, we're talking about someone who looks somewhat similar to Brock Bowers. I don't want to throw that comparison on him because it's a lot, but it does seem like Georgia is trying to keep a lot of the Brock Bowers stuff by adding him.
Yeah, we started watching Ben last summer, and again, he was a pretty easy study in the pass game. This guy's fun. This guy's fun to watch. I think Georgia fans are going to be excited once they really get to see him, because he didn't participate in the spring. So I was at the spring game. I got a chance to briefly meet Ben on the field there. So they haven't seen him, and again, so he was trying to finish out and get that Stanford degree. I don't blame him, but really a fun guy in the pass game, almost like a big wide receiver. Not only do they detach him and play him in the slot, like Stanford, you can play this guy out wide and throwing the ball down the field, and he can go up and make plays down the field. When he is closer to the alignment, he can, he's totally a threat to stretch the seam. So he's going to, with him and Oscar Delp, and I know they've got a couple other young guys they like. That room Todd Hartley has at Georgia is pretty ridiculous, as it's been for a couple of years now, going back when Donnell Washington and those guys were there too. So
yeah, I was gonna say it's been stacked pretty much forever, but it seems like now at this point, if they feel like they're missing something, they can just go in the portal and get it.
Yeah, and with the tight end position, a lot of college teams don't use it well. That's why you don't see a lot of highly productive college tight ends. I think there's some things the college coaches do much better job of than the NFL guys, but I do think the NFL does a much better job of using the tight end position. But Georgia's going to be able to create mismatches at that position. And with Carson Beck, and as quick as he can get the ball out of his hand, and watching him throw it live, man, his trigger, his release is unbelievable. So to get those guys involved in the pass game, Delp and Urosic, I mean, it's going to be dangerous.
Well, that's what I say. Carson Beck might be one of those guys that you are trying to get into the game to get up to 1-1 if that's possible, because you've had that situation happen before where somebody's come to your game and they're definitely a first rounder, but then they pop themselves up even more.
Yeah, no, he's people ask, who's the first quarterback right now. I would say it is Carson. Had he come out, and I know he was kind of waffling there at the end to come out last year, he would have been in Senior Bowl. We thought he was, we had him like second round, but it was trending in the right direction. I mean, the guy got consistently better over the course of last year's tape. So had he had a good process, he had a good Senior Bowl and combine and the whole workout circuit. Maybe he would have been the seventh first-round quarterback had he come out. But now I think it's smart. Now he's positioned himself to be the number one guy in this year's class. And yeah, we've had guys like that. I mean, going back to like when Carson Wentz got all the way up to number two from being a second-round pick. And, I think most teams had Baker. I was still in the league at this point. I mean, most teams had Baker in the teens. He goes number one. Just in my time here, we've had guys like Daniel Jones and Justin Herbert have made, big time jumps from, probably the teens up to the, the number 6 spot. So, yeah, Carson right now is probably the number one guy, but there's Quinn Ewers and Shedeur Sanders and some other guys. It's pretty unsettled. So it'll be fun to go through the fall and kind of see how it all shakes out.
Well, speaking of that, you had Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. this year. Were you surprised that they went as high as they did? Because I'm sitting there watching the draft, like I didn't see this.
Well, I think the Atlanta thing with Penix surprised everybody. Not that I don't think Mike's a starting quarterback in the league. I certainly think he is. I mean, we had him up there all year. We had Nix too, and that's again, I'm sitting in like a biased seat right now. But we really like those guys. I thought that so it was a little bit of a surprise. I thought Penix would go in the first round, but 8 to Atlanta after they signed Kirk Cousins. Yeah, that caught me a little off guard, but I didn't think, the word in the league coming through was that he wasn't going to get past the Raiders. Wherever they were at was like 13. It was, unless the Raiders were putting out a crazy smoke screen, the whole league, regardless of who I spoke to, at the team level leading up to the draft, everybody thought that was going to be the floor for him. And then Bo Nix, we talked about it before the draft, and I just felt like that Broncos thing was going to happen from the get-go. It was just too good of a marriage with Sean Payton and what Sean wants out of his quarterback. And I hope Bo proves people wrong. There was a lot of naysayers out there around draft time, a lot of snark on social media, about Bo's arm and, the accuracy, just, the dink and dunk offense of Oregon's offense. And again, I talking to the Denver Broncos guys, they tore this guy apart and, looked at all the downfield throws and the analytic stuff they came up with was that he was one of the best deep ball passers in the draft. So, yeah, it was good to have 2 quarterbacks go in the top 12 for us. It was a fun year.
Well, good luck as you prepare for next year. I know there's a lot of senior tape to watch over this summer, but we will have to catch back up because one of my favorite things, this is so behind the curtain, like, is me texting Jim over the summer. Who are the small school guys I need to know? Who are the guys that haven't started yet that may be 1-year starters and then they are big time draft prospects? Like, it is fascinating to watch that process.
It's fun. That's really the fun of it. Again, right now we know we want some of these guys in the game. They're no brainers. You mentioned a few of them. And hopefully they saw a year where we had 10 first-round picks and guys benefit. The cool part about this year's Senior Bowl for me was guys like Leatu Latu and Teli Esefuaga, those guys coming to Mobile, even though they knew they were going to be first-round picks, right? They wanted to be a part of it. They wanted to help their draft stock. Latu being the first defensive player taken at 15, yeah, that the reason that's a big deal is that he was in the mix with Jared Verse and Dallas Turner, 2 players that opted not to come to Mobile, and he's the one that ended up on top. So I love that for Latu because he came down here and competed. But to me, the fun part, back to your original thing, the fun part is finding the small school gems and finding the 1-year wonders, the guys that, because like a Xavier Leggett, Xavier Leggett, that guy was completely off our radar last year until week 1, and he goes off against North Carolina and ends up being a first-round draft pick. So to me, those are the really cool stories, and I love getting your texts, Andy.
Well, I can't Dylan Laub with the Raiders. Cannot wait to see him. Cannot wait till the NFL preseason to see Dylan Laub, who I was introduced through you guys getting him on your radar, and now because his quarterback at New Hampshire is now Minnesota's starting quarterback. So I've already watched a bunch of that offense because I was watching Dylan Laub.
Yeah, Max Brosmer. So that's another cool prospect. We like Max. So I'm excited to see him outside of that offense. But yeah, I know. And you loved watching our guy from Shepherd, Tyson Bagent, a couple years ago.
Tyson Bagent was a fun one. Yeah, those are always fun for me. I think my favorite so far, though, well, there's a couple. Your Wisconsin Whitewater offensive lineman from a few years ago who taught himself to snap during COVID because he'd been a guard. And then obviously, why am I blanking on his name? Redheaded guy, played for North Dakota State, plays for the Buccaneers now. Yes.
Yeah, his helmet's right behind me.
That's right. That's right. He's tremendous. I was learning about it, and because you guys put me on to him, I'm calling his family. I'm learning about he's driving a semi truck at age 12. Like it's just awesome. So
yeah, the small school thing again. Not to go off on a tangent, but what the portal's doing right now, it's great for some of these players. One thing that was always been great about the Senior Bowl, and that I always loved, as a guy that worked for a team before I took this role, was the small school element of it. And having guys like Cody Mauck and Quinn Miners, and like you said, from Whitewater, some of those guys, and see those guys make the climb. It's even in 2 years, man, just in 2 years, the portal has severely affected the small school element of our game. 3 years ago, I want to say that offensive line, just the offensive line group, had helmets from Tennessee Chattanooga and Fordham and North Dakota State, Northern Iowa, Southern. I mean, there was as many small school helmets in the O-line room that year as there was, Power Fives. And here we are 2 or 3 years later. And I don't think there wasn't a small school helmet in the offensive line group out of 25 guys this year. So,
and Cole Strange, the Chattanooga player you mentioned, went in the first round.
Yeah.
Like went in the first round to the Patriots. And so let me ask you this though, this a couple of years later, like what would happen with a Cole Strange now? Would he just, Tennessee or Kentucky or somebody like that would just be like, hey, come on, we need you to play now?
I would absolutely think that. Yeah. And ironically, that was the game that got Cole in the Senior Bowl. We watched the first game we watched was him against Kentucky. It was their one play up. There was their one play up opportunity, and Cole played his butt off. I mean, he was just mauling dudes. I didn't even have to watch any SoCon tape after that. Like it was a done deal. But yeah, I would think he would be in Knoxville or Lexington just 2 years later. So I mean, the guys that there are a handful of guys that are being loyal to their school. Even like, unfortunately now, like our small school guys this year kind of felt like the group of 5 guys. Like Quinyon Mitchell felt like a small school player in our game this year. And I think we all famously heard Nick Saban on the draft coverage talking about Alabama was trying to get Quinyon to go in the portal because they wanted him. And then their 3 corners would have been Terrion Arnold, Quinyon Mitchell, and Kool-Aid in the slot.
Oh my Lord.
But isn't that but Toledo's not a small school. You know what I'm saying? Like historically, you and I have grown up small schools as D2 guys and 1AA guys.
CS, yeah, exactly.
And now like Conference USA and Sun Belt and MAC, like those are small schools. So we got to change it, but I don't love it. I used to love having all the small school guys in the game, and we do small school Saturday every we're going to start that up this week for the first edition of it this year. We've done that for 6 years, highlighting these small school guys. And it's harder to do that. Frankly, we used to run that through June and July, and I'd post 5, 6, 7, 8 guys every week of small school guys that legitimately had a chance to play in the Senior Bowl. And it's not this in 2 years. It's a different landscape.
Yeah. I was gonna say that the scouting at the college level has gotten so much more sophisticated now. They're working like the NFL scouting departments used to work in.
Well, and that's it's a positive thing in the sense, like talking to our scout school guys this week. Some of the advice I had to them was go back to the school you played at, right? Like there's only 32 teams in the NFL, so the job opportunities in the NFL aren't great. Not to say you can't get there, especially being a former NFL player. You've got a nice network to start with, but now these schools are having to do it. You've got a high school department and you've got a college department. So a lot of these NFL guys that have been in the league a long time and are getting squeezed out of the league because of their age. Guys in their 50s, they're getting squeezed out. They're getting replaced by younger guys in their 20s. But now at least there's an opportunity for them to. I mean, because who's done working in their 50s? Who can retire? Not many people can retire in their 50s if they work in football. So there's full departments now and a lot of them are former NFL guys. One of our guys that's worked for us the last couple of years of the Senior Bowl is with your Gators right now, working the portal guys for the Gators. So it's changed for that part for the good. More jobs in football. That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's tough though because you're right. It does take a toll on the small schools. They become kind of the farm system where by the time the guys get to your game, they've played at the small school, but then they've done a year or so at the power conference level as well. But well, Jim, I cannot wait to see who you turn me on to this summer. It's always a lot of fun. And this is going to be another one.
All right, Andy, have a great summer, man. Thanks for squeezing me on here to talk about the portal stuff. It's fun, but have a great summer, man. I know we'll get connected in Dallas there at SEC Media Days, and it's going to feel like tomorrow. But enjoy the next 5 or 6 weeks before I see you in Dallas.
Oh, I'm sure we'll find ways to bug you between now and then. So thank you, Jim. The great Jim Nagy from the Senior Bowl. We do appreciate him. And yeah, he's got a nice head start on things. So we will definitely be picking his brain in terms of who to be watching this season. He's a great resource because I love getting that list of guys that okay, because that conversation we had about Darius Robinson last year at SEC Media Days, I was like, okay, let's watch Darius Robinson. Let's watch this Missouri defense. And guess what? Pretty awesome, both of them. So we'll see what Jim comes up with. We'll see who he's looking at. And yeah, it's good intel, and it helps all of us become more informed college football watchers. So, by the way, if you're watching right now, please like and subscribe at the On3 Sports YouTube page. We're here every day, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern time. Tomorrow, Max Olson from The Athletic will join us. A little more of the Retraining Your Brain series, but a little bit different way. We're just going to be talking about the things we are really excited about for the 2024 season. Some of the new things, some of the old things that are coming back. Like, I don't know, Texas and Texas A&M are going to play football again. It's going to be wild and crazy. It's going to be so much fun. I cannot wait till we get to the real games. But until we do, we can dream about them. So we'll talk to Max tomorrow about all of the things that we are pumped about for the 2024 season. Talk to you then.